Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Enterprise Mobility Insights Outlook podcast. I'm Gina Daniel Lee, Vice President of Strategic Alliances and Partnerships here at Stratix. Today, we're cranking up the legacy time machine with a very special guest, Stratix co-founder Bonney Shuman. Bonney, I am thrilled to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Oh, listen, it's an honor. Thank you for asking me.
Can you believe I started working with you and Dave? I think it was almost like 20 years ago.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
You were just in middle school and I had just started high school. Yes, I do
That's
remember
right.
that. Yeah. Ooh.
Well, I'm super excited to give our listeners some context around how Stratix got started. But before we dive into that, why don't you take a minute and tell our listeners about yourself, your career, and really the beginnings of it?
Quick background on me. I went to high school in Atlanta. My family moved a lot before we ended up in Atlanta, but I did end up in Atlanta in the early 70s. I'm one of four children. My father had a corporate job with Texaco, and we moved a great deal. It was a time when corporations, that's what you did in order to continue to advance. So after living in North Carolina, Virginia, and various cities, we ended up in Atlanta, early 70s. So I went to high school here and then continued my education at the University of Georgia. I graduated from UGA in 1980 with a degree in finance. And during my college, I had started interning in a bank. So naturally, I went back to the bank as just kind of the natural step after I graduated and continued to move ahead there. And during that stint is when I ran into Dave Knowlton, who really gets all the credit for starting at the time, which was Barcode Systems. That was our original name when we incorporated in March of 1983. And around that time, actually probably a couple months before that, Dave lived in my apartment complex. I knew him from UGA. He was fraternity brothers with my brothers. And so I would see Dave, coming and going kind of in the apartment complex, and he knew I worked at a bank, and he came to see me to see if he could borrow the money to start this company and he didn't know the name at the time, but through his work at NCR, that's what he was doing at the time, he had come across this opportunity that involved using barcodes. So he said, I've got this idea. I want to start this company. What do you think? And the reality was we didn't do loans for that type of business, even though it was less than $1,000. I laugh about it now. But so I didn't give him the loan, but through that conversation, I would run into him as time went on because I had Wednesdays off. I worked on Saturdays. Our bank was open on Saturday. And oftentimes he was in sales and he'd cut out early and see me and continue to talk to me about this idea. So back up to why he had this idea. He was selling mainframe computers for NCR and had a customer that was providing products in the grocery marketplace. And they would sell products on consignment and they'd go out and put the products in the store, but every 2 weeks would need to bring things back that weren't selling and then replenish them with things that were. And they were using or wanted to use barcodes to be able to keep track of that inventory. So because again, it was a unique situation, they ran into this company called Symbol Technologies, who at the time was introducing the very first handheld scanner, which was revolutionary, big, significant thing in the industry. Because prior to that time, the only way to scan products was in that grocery store configuration where you would have to drag a product across the grocery store scanner, just like you do in most grocery stores today. That limited how much the technology could be used because many situations your product was too bulky to drag it across, and they were doing many times cases of products. So Symbol Technologies was revolutionary, was developing this handheld scanner and really wanted to focus on making that technology work. And so they got Dave all energized about starting it. He started talking to me about it, and then you can really say the rest is history, so to speak. So that's probably enough of an intro, but I can dive into any more of that, Gina, that you think is helpful or interesting. But that's a quick intro.
No, I love it. That's perfect. And I think, keep me honest here, it's the story that Dave actually ended up borrowing the money from his mother, I think like $750.
You're right. You're spot on. That's exactly what he did. And I take the credit for leading him in that direction.
So it seems like today, we're so used to barcodes, right? Every time we go into a store, something is scanned. But actually, you guys had to do a lot of education, didn't you, with customers around this? Talk to me a little bit about that.
For sure. Yeah. That is really, we started this company at the time when the technology was so new, even though it dates back to the late 70s in the grocery arena. It wasn't an overnight success in the grocery marketplace. And hopefully you have some old enough listeners that remember that, although probably not. Maybe most of the folks go, what? Barcodes haven't always been here. But in the early 80s, I mean, we still had, whoops, sorry about that. We still have grocery stores that weren't using barcodes to scan their products. We had grocery stores that would just punch in that you were buying something for 59 cents. You had no idea what you were buying in the whole bit. So even in 83, when we started, it was a new concept and something that people were fighting. So in 83, kind of the great or what was made our entry into the marketplace kind of ideal was the general merchandise community. And what I mean by that, the Walmarts and Kmart, some of your listeners may recognize that term. They both had introduced a mandate to use barcoding to be able to supply products to them. So because that was happening in the early 80s, 83, and then into 84, it gave us a whole new marketplace of folks that were going to be required to use barcoding and didn't know how to use it. So as we attempted to sell our products and sell our services, people would ask questions. Well, okay, I need to obtain this barcode, because that was really our first product, was the camera-ready artwork to put a barcode on your product. That required what was called a film master. It was that image. We obtained that in the very, very beginning. We were a reseller for a company called Symbol Technologies out of New York. And I would place the order, fax the order into Symbol. They would make it and drop ship it under our name, which is another funny thing too. So that was one of our first big business decisions. Should we buy or lease a fax machine? We actually talked about that for a while, which is so funny now. But it took like 6 minutes to fax one page of material. But that's how we placed all our orders. But because it was new to this whole new marketplace, people were just desperate to learn about it. And I was fortunate enough to learn from really the inventors. I got to meet the people that had designed the barcode, that had designed this very first handheld barcode scanner. And they were so anxious to really, if you will, spread the love, to spread the knowledge, that they took me right under their arms and said, okay, I'm going to teach you everything about it. So when we would, I'd either sell a barcode to a company, or they'd get in touch with us somehow and they'd want to learn about it. And I'd say, okay, well, let me teach you how to print it and print it correctly. And that evolved into, could you come teach my employees? So I would like, sure. And they go, well, how much do we charge? Do you charge for this? And we go, I don't know. How much should we charge? I mean, so we then started this consulting branch where we would go out and teach people how to print a barcode correctly, and what colors could you use and which colors could you not use. And then we would verify that they had printed their product correctly for them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it really snowballed and was such a good way to get our name out there in terms of really having the expertise that would be valued. And obviously gave us a way to generate revenue as well. But that was really, really core to our foundation as we started, for sure.
I love that. So today, when you come into our building in the foyer, there's now a timeline wall. And when Ross and I do tours, we start there by giving some history about the company. We have some, really old equipment like the early barcode verifiers, and we have the old Symbol P370. But at the very beginning of the wall, Bonnie, we have a book that you wrote, The Guide to Barcode. And talk to me about that. I think that was probably part of that education process as well, right?
Oh, for sure. Well, first of all, I have goosebumps on that. So I need to come visit again, because I wasn't there the last time I visited. That's great. It did. I mean, I remember, and I might have it. I'm going to have to look back in my attic the next time I sneak back there. The very, very first book I put together was actually, we used to do company retreats, which is funny because in the very beginning, I think there was, the first time we did a retreat, there were 6 of us, but we wanted to make sure everybody in the company knew everything about how a barcode was created, how do you print it properly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That evolved. So I have a little notebook that I put together about, how to decode a UPC code and how is a UPC different from a code 3 of 9 and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I cannot I'm almost positive that the very first time I took that outside of the company to a corporate sort of venue where I gave them more than just a few sheets of paper. I was hired by Milliken Company, which is based in Spartanburg, South Carolina, a big textile company. And their IT department, and I can't recall what the initiative was, what kind of introduced it to them, but somehow they were kind of ahead of the curve, probably in their space, one of the first companies to recognize that automatic identification had a role even in there, because it had been perceived as just this grocery or general merchandise, like just a retail solution. So somehow I got introduced to them and they said, well, we want to learn all about it. And so I took what I had used really to just train, our second and our third and our fourth and our fifth employee and said, okay, well, I'm going to make this a guide that's going to be helpful for you to really understand the fundamentals of how barcodes are created, what are the various methods to print them, how do you print them correctly. So I did this book for Milliken, and it was in a little black notebook, and it expanded at that point, and I typed it on a typewriter. Yeah. So
Computer.
just to show you how old this, how far back this goes. So you would just laugh at seeing the type if I can find it. And I really still think I have it. So that was my first informal guide to barcoding that I did for Milliken. And then someone else wanted me to do it. The next company heard about it, and I then took it, and every time I did a different version. And then someone said, well, maybe you should print it and sell it. And I'm like, okay, well, let's do that. So that's how it happened. Yeah.
I love it. It's interesting to think that barcode verification tools are still part of our business today, right? But
Yeah.
at some point, there's this evolution of the company, right? From being a, consultant to a major player in mobile technology. I mean, keep me honest with this too. I think, wasn't Stratix's first major role in the proliferation of fixed mobile scanners the deal at the front end of the Lowe's stores? I'm thinking like 23,000 devices or something.
Actually, Home Depot gets credit. Don't forget those orange aprons. They go first. They went first. Yeah. And Lowe's was very shortly thereafter. I mean, they were within 6 months of one another, but and that actually has an interesting background too, that kind of ties it into this educational piece. So what started out me doing a lot of education, we really grew a consulting division and had 4 or 5 folks that were going around the country teaching people about barcoding, how to do it, why to do it, how to do it correctly. That was very much in tune with what we were doing on the verification side. And they were really hand in hand, because that was part of the importance. A barcode's not going to work unless you print it properly. And to verify that you print it properly, we had the equipment to do it. Which is also a funny evolution story too. That very first verifier Simple Technologies made, it weighed about 50 pounds. And we had this big carrying case, and I would go across the country selling that device. It was like a $10,000, 50-pound verifier, on that I would take on wheels. And then we developed one of the very first handheld, not the very first one, but we developed one of the few handheld verifiers as well. But through that education, again, we got to meet a variety of companies and folks, and responded to an RFP for the hardlines industry. This was in the mid to late 80s. We were hired, thinking it was 86, 87-ish, by the American Hardware Manufacturers Association, AHMA, based out of Chicago, right outside Chicago, to write a guideline for the hardlines industry, meaning outside that general merchandise, as you referred to it, the Home Depots, Lowe's, Aces of the world. And that brought a whole new set of challenges because, well, number one, it was a great honor to be able to write this guideline, but then we had to really examine their marketplace, what they were selling in a whole, different way. It's a foregone conclusion now that the same UPC code that you use in the grocery and the general merchandise community is now used, but that wasn't always. We looked at other barcodes as maybe having some opportunity to be scanned there. But so we did a series of focus groups around the country and talked about, how to use the technology, what were the benefits, et cetera. We had a lot of pushback from companies that said, this is never going to work in our industry. You're not going to put a barcode on a nail. You're not going to put a barcode on a piece of plywood, blah, just fighting. And it took a whole new approach on, well, how about a package of nails instead of a nail, and all other things that kind of made it happen. But eventually, we got this guideline that everybody in the industry embraced, and it gave us introduction to a whole new marketplace of potential users and the like. And it was all based on that educational aspect that led us in this direction, and then introduced us to all these supply chains that had a need to, how do you print a barcode again, and how do you do it successfully? So it was a great another opportunity for us, for sure.
I love that. And, let's talk a little bit about the, further evolution. In 2000s, we renamed the company, right? We evolved from barcode systems to a company that was now adding, services to the portfolio. Talk to me a bit about that transition.
Well, it all kind of, again, goes back to that education and that ability to encourage people to use the technology, what the benefits were. There are so many that it doesn't take long for people to go, wow, I can track people, places, things. I can run my business more efficiently. I can obtain vital data for managing my business that wasn't even available without this as kind of the key to it. So it was actually 98 is when we made the decision. So when we started Barcode Systems, we were the only barcode systems in 1983. And then in 85, there was a Barcode Systems and Things. There was a Barcode Systems and Labels in the later 80s. And then there was a Barcode Systems California. People started using that name and Labels and Barcode Systems. We're like, so it was more and more difficult to, when you called somebody, say, well, no, I'm the Barcode Systems based in Atlanta. We're the ones working with XYZ company. No. I'm not the Labels and Barcode Systems. I'm the Barcode Systems. Yes, we do sell labels. Again, that's another thing, because we had a printing press and we were doing a lot of label business. But so it became more and more difficult to have a unique identity as Barcode Systems. And we had gotten the opportunity to do some real solution development. And I can't recall, it was something at Home Depot. I think it was a receiving application that we helped develop. And again, when we were trying to get some unique branding, Barcode Systems just wasn't unique anymore. So we sat around with the whiteboard and just tried to come up with something that was unique and that did have some meaning, which we felt like Stratix and Tech, we felt that all did. But we really wanted it to be kind of not necessarily mean one thing, so that we could have that unique. And at the time, several businesses had started to do that rather than have a business name that defined exactly what you did. We kind of went in a different direction, which is how that was kind of really a lunch conversation that went on for several days, and people would come in and look at the whiteboard and vote or comment or circle what they like best. And that's how we came up with Stratix. I think it was 98, although we might want to put that on the timeline and see, but I think that's a time frame sort of.
So was it hard to pivot a company known for one thing for so long to something broader?
In some respects, yes, but in many respects, we used the same core principles that we had in the beginning, which was listening to our customers and saying, okay, what is it you need? And that's what we did in the beginning to continue to offer these new expanded product lines. It was, what is it you need? And sometimes it was education of their supply chain, right in our wheelhouse, to teach 4,000 suppliers how to use barcoding. That was perfect. That's what we've been doing since the beginning. In some cases, it was, I went to cashier college at Home Depot for 3 days because they wanted to be able to use barcodes better on their front end. So I went to cashier college to learn how to be a cashier, to find out what was hard about scanning one thing versus another. And that helped us come up with, we had this menu book at the front end that had barcodes on it so that they didn't have to always go to a certain product and scan it. That also gave us the opportunity to sell the very first cordless scanners at Home Depot, which was a huge project for us. We spent the night in a store to walk with their overnight packagers to find out how they relabeled the shelves, which is what helped develop the mobile printing solution that we did for them. So those principles on really, it goes back to the kind of the 1 minute manager, it was the 1 minute, 1 minute service provider. Take your shoes off, walk a mile in their shoes, or walk for a minute in their shoes and find out what their needs are. And we continue to evolve by saying, you know what, I think we can do that, And in some cases, we didn't know how we were going to do it. Frankly, in the very beginning, it was like, hair on fire. Yeah. But that's, in fact, if you'll allow me, like a 2-minute quick overview on this mobile printing solution, it to me is a great example. So we had a relationship with Home Depot. We had been doing all this education for their supply chain and helping them really implement barcoding. And I got introduced to them through American Hardware Manufacturers because I had done that trade association work. And that's how I really met the folks at Home Depot. And we really had a very trusted, good relationship. And we heard about the fact that they were looking at, well, we didn't know at the time, but after the fact, heard for some people in the industry that they were looking at adapting mobile printing, which was very revolutionary then. And we're like, what? And it was a completely different silo. We were working with their UPC group, and this was coming out of operations, and we really didn't know the people in operations. So somebody goes, oh yeah, they were taking RFPs for that business, and they closed last Friday. That's too bad that y'all didn't have an opportunity to do that. I'm like, what? So this is like on a Monday, and I called my person that I'd been working over there probably 4 years worth. And I said, hey, so-and-so, I just heard about this mobile printing, and I can't believe we didn't have an opportunity to have a dialogue about it. That is something that, we've been printing barcodes since you could start printing barcodes. And while we don't have a solution right off, I'm certain that, we know your operation better than anybody. So, can we talk? She says, let me make a few phone calls. I'm not sure. Certainly nothing I've been involved with, but let me see. So a few hours later, she calls me and says, okay, here's the deal. You've got 48 hours. I have talked to these people because I've told them how much you mean to us, what you've done for us, how your company has come through time and time again. You've got 48 hours. And if you embarrass me, I'll kick your.
Oh boy.
And I was like, okay, great. And that's what I was like, hair on fire, hang up the phone. Okay, Dave, here's the deal. Let's rally the troops. We got to figure out how to come up with something that will at least look like we know what we're talking about in 48 hours. I'm going to run over there and get a copy of what the RFP is, et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, we won that business, but whoo, what a challenge. But it goes back to, again, having that trusted relationship, people that, customers that trust you because you have demonstrated that you're committed. Their business success is obviously your success, but you're as committed to that as your own. And the rest is, again, it's a great story.
It is a great story. Hey, so Bonney, you sold your part of the company, I think around 2011. And since then, you've been probably even during that time, before that time, you're mentoring young people who want to be successful, as successful in business as you've been. Like, how are you doing that? And what challenges do young people face in business, especially women?
Well, this timing couldn't be more appropriate. You're right. It was 2011, which again, I cannot believe that it's been that long. The time has flown by. I don't miss the stress part, I miss the people. So again, this is fun. Thanks for letting me do this. I was fortunate the biggest, this is probably one of the most rewarding things that I've done. I'll speak to that and I'll talk about some other opportunities that have risen through UGA. But another woman at UGA, real involved in the business school, and that's where my degree's from, approached me about starting a program for young women. We call it the Sea Island Scholars because I live down in South Georgia in the Sea Island area. And the reason she started this program was because they had similar programs. The retired CEO from Coke does a program for men every year. And she's like, we have these opportunities for men. We really don't have any for women. And frankly, I think men do a much better job of networking than women anyway. It just seems to be something more natural in many respects. So she asked me if I would help start this program, and I agreed. And we just this past weekend had the 7th annual Sea Island Scholar Program. And 12 women are selected. Hopefully we'll do more over time, but selected to come down here for the weekend. And it's really an immersion program where we have mentors that talk to them just about that next chapter and entering the workplace and what challenges exist, maybe more for women than men, although challenges exist anyway when making that transition. But we focus on women. And what challenges, particularly if they want to pursue marriage or a partnership and children and things that tend to be more women focused. Again, I'm not excluding the fact that men have similar challenges, but we tend to focus on that. So it's really a great weekend to talk to these women and hear what their concerns are. These women are all overachievers. Even to get in UGA right now, you're an overachiever, and then they're all involved in nonprofit work and in leadership work and more clubs than ever existed back when I was in school. And they all seem to be doing that, and many in leadership capacities. And, so many of them started a nonprofit and this, that, and the other. It's just so darn impressive. But at the same time, they're lacking confidence about, okay, if I'm moving to New York and I don't know anybody, and one of the young women's moving to Salt Lake City, and one of them is a junior. They usually have a couple of juniors. The majority are seniors, and then there's usually a graduate student or two. But just the confidence that a lot of them I don't have an internship yet. I've got to have an internship. Is it going to be the right one? And just telling them, heck, if it's not the right one, that's still a success, because it means you learn something. It means that you don't want to be in a cube programming all day or whatever it is that you may be doing. So I've been doing that program is one of the things of which I'm most proud, because we had our wrap-up brunch yesterday morning before they all went back to Athens. And not a single one got up and didn't shed a tear or get emotional in terms of what this one-on-one time. We've got some of the mentors that are engaged are just so darn sharp and impressive from all over the country. They came. We had 7 mentors here to be with these young women. So that's a biggie for me. But there's a formal mentor program at UGA that I'm very involved with. And then I have some friends here who have started small businesses that I love to talk to and counsel as best I can, because, there were so many valuable lessons that I learned that I just feel like I've got to play it forward. I've got to, if I can save anybody some of the downs, which every business has, then I feel like it's my duty to do it. And I really get great pleasure from doing it.
I love that. I would like to be part of that program.
Oh, I'd love for you to. That's great. I'm telling you, incredible. Yeah, very rewarding.
So as we're wrapping up, let's go back for just a minute. What is one thing that Bonney today would tell Bonney in 1983? As I think life speaks to the advice you would also pass along to other young people.
Yeah. Oh, golly. Not to let the lows get you too low, because the sun's going to come back up tomorrow. There were so many stressful times that I felt like oh, it's dragging me down. Just chalk it all up to the fact that it's experience, and even what may seem like a mistake at the time, and there were several, we're all learning experiences that you chalk up, and you hope just not to repeat those mistakes. So I would say just to, just roll the punches and not let any of the stressful times just to be too much of a dip, to realize the sun's going to come back up tomorrow and we're going to go at it again. And there is a lot of forgiveness in the world if you're transparent and honest in things, because we made some mistakes. But right away, we owned them every single time and did what we could to make it right. And it always worked out, and really to our benefit, because not everybody in business is honest and transparent. And I do believe we got a lot of runway in those situations where we did, and because we had some competitors, frankly, and other folks that weren't doing what we were doing from that perspective. So.
That's perfect. So thank you for that, Bonney. Just great, to hear the history of the company and what you've been doing since then. So if you've listened to any of our podcasts, we end with a little fun with some rapid questions.
Uh-huh. All right.
So right. What is the one work skill you think everyone should have?
It is to continue to be motivated to learn, because that's what made our business grow, is always trying to look at, okay, what's next? And so we had to have an open mind on, back in the day, RFID, what can we do with RFID? Let's get somebody busy doing some experimenting on the sidelines. So always being eager to learn, either about one of your customers' business and what their challenges are, or what we think's new could be from an offering perspective, but try to make that a goal every day, something new that you could learn that might make you a better provider, a better teammate, a better supervisor, or a better employee, whatever the case may be, but always keep that learning cap on.
Very true. What sport would you compete in if you were in the Olympics?
By skill set or by dream? By dream, gymnastics. By skill basket, probably badminton or something. But dream, I'd love to flip across that floor.
Me too. Yeah. I would break though at this. And then finally, if you ran the world, what's one thing that you'd change?
Make kindness a requirement.
I like that. I think we should have you run the world. It's been such a treat to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much. I hope you had fun. I did.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you again. It's an honor. Thank you for including me.
Of course. And listeners, if you liked what you heard, or would like more information, or would like to sign up for future episodes, please visit us at stratixcorp.com/podcast to subscribe. We'd also love it if you'd rate and leave a review for any podcast that you've listened to, or suggest any future topics you would like us to explore. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.